Daniela, I would like to start this panel discussion with asking you, it was fascinating, the use of AI in clinical trials, but we know that in order to have real results from clinical trials, we need diversity of the participants. And how can you assure that the AI will really use a diverse enough population?
Thank you. I think this is one of the most important questions and goes back to the risks of increasing and perpetuating the biases, concerns that we have. And I think my answer would have two sides of the same coin. The first piece is to make sure that the clinical trial itself has a proper patient representation, because AI is just a tool. And it's going to help us understand patterns of the data that we're applying the tool. So it all goes back to good data from the clinical trials themselves. The second side of the same coin is the AI tool, and we have to make sure that those devices are properly tested and properly developed with diverse populations as well. And there are different ways to assure that quality, but again, transparency and responsibility in the implementation of those tools is the best defense that we have.
Vas, you have a lot of experience in clinical trials. What do you think, just particularly about this question about the use of AI, maybe as changing some of the ways we are exercising clinical trials nowadays?
Yeah, thanks, Anat. I think that Daniela actually did a great job of highlighting some of the opportunities. Obviously, with using AI-based tools, we can be more precise in patient selection. For example, identifying patients who may be at highest risk for progression. And so that obviously would be valuable. Obviously, many of the panel individuals on the panel have used AI tools to do processing of images to get very precise and quantitative values for various different parameters that one might study in a trial. And so both of those things can obviously reduce potentially your sample size and improve the efficiency and lower the cost of doing a trial. And obviously sort of the next thing, thinking about the future, is actually the possibility of using synthetic control arms in trials. I mean, there is a potential appetite even from regulators to consider that. Obviously, we have to do the work to prove that that could work. But these are all, I think, ways that AI could help us in streamlining trials in the future.
Thank you. So today we heard and we will hear a lot about new drugs and new treatments, and we'll have a lot in our armamentarium for managing retinal disease. So I'd like to ask Justis, how do you think AI can help us in personalizing the management of our patients? Because we'll have so many tools and we'll need to choose from. With complement inhibition alone, we have a few drugs for GA.
Yeah, thanks, Anat. And I think Daniela did a wonderful job kind of outlining all of those different potential opportunities. One of the interesting things as we employ AI is where is it in the gate of choosing and selecting sort of the personalization? Is it actually making a decision for us that we may or may not have transparency to? Or is it simply augmenting something, for example, as Vas alluded to, that might allow us to measure something in a better way that is intuitive? And so I think there's tremendous opportunity, not only at very focused levels, such as at imaging data, but also at the big data side of things, incorporating things like smoking history or other clinical demographics that may allow us to, again, move towards precision medicine, something like what we've seen in oncology, but being able to utilize that more within retinal care as well.
Yeah, I think that maybe sometimes it can also help us identify some parameters that we are not even aware of before the use of AI. Ursula, you have a lot of experience in everything, but also in personalizing, looking at personalizing the management of retinal disease. Can you give us a few words about this?
I think that we should be a little bit more critical with the word artificial intelligence, because what we are doing at the moment is image analysis. There's nothing really artificial in it if you are really doing it the right way. And intelligence should come from the user and not from the tool in general. So I think that the word artificial intelligence is a little bit misleading. What we are doing and what the benefit is here, particularly in medicine, is that we use the data that are available in the image. So we have millions and millions of pixels in these fantastic high resolution three-dimensional images. And what we are using is only a minor part of it, what a human eye can see, and not even in a quantitative manner. So by just doing quantification and look or detect subclinical features like photoreceptor degeneration, and then have a faster workflow in the real world so that we can take over the responsibility of care of our patients much better than we do so far in the so-called real world, which is an ugly world in terms of care, and then be better in clinical trials. We can gain a lot more insight, and we have to remove bias that comes from misled or incomplete clinical care. So when we did an analysis of the fluid study, the Australian study, that had the hypothesis that subretinal fluid should not be treated, and they came out with the conclusion, indeed, we should not treat subretinal fluid as it is irrelevant. But the parameters that they used was just the height of SRF. And when you do a simple volume measurement, you notice that that was not the message in the trial. In the trial, you see that those patients that have increasing subretinal fluid in terms of volume, that means truly, they will lose visual acuity. So this is a bias that was removed by artificial intelligence, a term which I will not use anymore after this, but which came from the clinics. In the DRCR, central retinal thickness was taken for retreatment purposes. But when you look on the fluid using AI volume measurement, which we are just doing on all of the DRCR trials, you see that CRT remains the same, but intraretinal fluid changes enormously. And those people that have changed an increase in intraretinal fluid, they are improperly taken care of. So this is where we have to get out of.
Thank you. Omer, can you give us more specifically maybe an example of how AI can help us in personalization of the management of the patients?
Yeah, so I think like as Daniela proposed in the beginning of the talk, so we all use AI mainly, like for research purposes, but eventually I think like one of the big gaps that we have is taking those algorithms, to our clinic and actually use it in our clinic. And that's still a big gap we don't have in our clinic. We all want to get, for instance, an algorithm that would tell us which GA patient we would like to treat next. And this, this gap between what we have in our research, as Ursula mentioned, and what we have in clinic is not done yet. And it was also shown in a publication in Lancet when they tried and used the Google validated diabetic retinopathy, and they tried to actually implement it in rural areas. And all the, the faults was how to work on the workflow, how they didn't have it on the EHR purposes. Yeah. And I think this gap, once, it will be resolved, so it will bring more algorithms into our actual clinical practice.
Lejla, any comments about this topic?
Excellent. I think what I'm hearing, and clearly Daniela did a really beautiful overview how to help us in clinical trials, how to make that timeline shorter, less cost, and really getting the products to clinic. What I'm also hearing, we're using very much imaging to help us analyze it better and use AI to understand what we are seeing in front of us. But what I really would love help is in clinic, with really the flow, managing the patients. We anticipate more and more patients in our clinic, but yet there's shortages of really staff on every level, including clinicians in the future. So I would love to have assistance with flow and managing those patients better, understanding which patients really truly need to see a physician. And I love seeing presentation today where robotics in the future will help us take care of some of these more simple procedures, using AI methods to really help us identify patients, but also treat them in clinic.
Thank you. I would like to continue a little bit with what Omer alluded to, is that the use of these sophisticated methods may be difficult just because of technical issues. So I would like to ask the panel, how do you think AI can help us in implementing telemedicine? For example, in the digital health model of the Notal Home OCT and the PHP, definitely this AI helps in bringing the management of the patients or the monitoring of the patients to the patient's home. And this can be important everywhere, but maybe more in specific areas. So what are your thoughts about that? Let's maybe start with Lejla again.
Yeah, no, as a pediatric retina specialist, I've had intimate experience in telescreening and telemedicine for ROP. It's a rare disease, yet quite critical and impactful. And I think the process of identifying those patients and following them in remote locations where we do not have clinicians that can examine these babies, I think it's been crucial. So I think that has been a specific example that has evolved over time that has really improved care of patients. And I find that that has been critical for that subset of patients. So I would love to see that future involved even further, not only to help us identify patients, but follow as we're treating them and kind of use it more so not just in clinical hospital setting, but translate that to maybe outpatient setting, pediatrician offices, school settings where we can potentially not only screen for ROP, for other pediatric retinal diseases as well.
Yeah, to the optometrist or to the patients themselves, like with the home OCT. Vas, do you have any comments about that?
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think, screening is obviously going to be one of the initial translational applications, in part also because from a regulatory perspective, getting approval for a screening device is a bit easier than a diagnostic per se. So that's one of the reasons, and obviously there are many opportunities. It's probably most well-known in diabetic retinopathy, but now we have new treatments for geographic atrophy. So obviously there's going to be an interest in having tools available to screen and identify patients, especially because this is a group of patients that may not be in our retina clinic practices. So I think that's definitely going to be an increasing trend. I think we'll definitely see technologies for that in the immediate future. You mentioned home diagnostics, and I definitely think that's it's going to be an important part of the future of our field. I think that obviously from there's a real interest in trying to overall reduce the cost of the healthcare system. And I think home diagnostics, essentially you're sort of shifting part of the cost onto the consumer, onto the patient to actually
or to someone who pays for the patient.
Fair enough. And so I think those are opportunities there as we think about how we re-engineer the healthcare system and the like to be able to cope with what's going to be a big influx of older patients in the coming decades. We can envision how AI is going to be a big part of that solution.
Yeah. Ursula, do you want to add something to this specific topic?
Telemedicine.
Telemedicine, exactly.
Or the Notal system.
No, telemedicine.
So I think that telemedicine, of course, is a huge window of opportunity, but it's also very clear that first AI has to be fully arrived in the clinical practice where eye doctors can control it. We need better AI tools that are truly reliable. It's so easy to write a paper about analysis of 56 patients, but this is not an AI tool. This is just an AI experiment. And what we do when we develop AI tools, which we do since more than 10 years, is that we always, from the beginning, go the regulatory path so that we have all the documentation and all the rules and regulations already included from the beginning, because at the end then it is too late, you cannot rewind the wheel. So going back to telemedicine, yes, a huge opportunity, particularly in GA also, where screening is most important because damage that has already occurred cannot disappear. And this is why we have to identify the focal event of photoreceptor vortexing, which AI tools can do. And this is the patient that we need to treat to prevent any vision loss. So that is what telemedicine can do, because all of these people, particularly in GA, are all seen too late by us, but they are seen by optometrists, people that sell them reading glasses. And this is where another place for telemedicine would be. But first, we have to make sure that AI works in the hands of us as doctors, and there's a lot of work to do.
Sorry. Yes, please, Justis.
So, to kind of tag on to the telemedicine theme, one of the interesting things is that currently at least when I think of telemedicine, I think about the devices going out to the patients, whether it's home monitoring, going to the NICU, bringing that in, having a way to reduce the work burden through, for example, DR screening. Another sort of spin on that will be what Omer was sort of alluding to, and that challenge is how do we bring these tools into our clinics? It may actually be that we're using cloud-based systems to sort of have a bridge between not necessarily having it on our diagnostic system that's sitting in front of us, but rather a way for us to transfer that data and those key pieces out to an analysis platform as well, and it's coming back to us. And that, in fact, that analysis system, whether it's, we call it AI or whatever it is that we want to label that, that may also be a bridge that we see that is kind of an extension of telemedicine, but it's now providing us as clinicians faster access to this technology that may take a much longer time to go through the traditional device pathway as well.
Absolutely. So we don't have a lot of time, so I'll combine the next two or three questions to one, and I'll go one by one. What are the limitations of using AI? So it has to do with the relationship with us, retinal physician, whether we agree to how much do we need to have the box clear to us, how it works, the regulatory issues, ethical issues. So maybe if every one of you can give a minute of that, and we'll combine the three last questions together. Lejla, let's start with you and go up the panel.
I think the data is going to be as good as what you fed into it. So clearly that was very well pointed out. So, and I think we have much work to do in our clinical trials and our real world data in terms of being very inclusive and really having good data that goes in. So I think we have to be mindful and know what went into that data to understand how to use it.
Justis.
I think from my perspective, having really good performance metrics, to understand how confident the system is, where does it trip up? So as Ursula mentioned, when we're talking about image analysis, oftentimes it's very straightforward of being able to look at it and see is the accuracy that's there. When we're talking about larger decision-making tools, it becomes much more complex to understand what all went into what the output is. And so I think really understanding how that plays out for us as clinicians, I think that'll be a key thing that we need to understand going forward.
And are you concerned with liability issues too in this context?
For sure, and I think especially when we start to think about the personalized medicine piece, if we're making therapeutic decisions based on these tools, how can we have the confidence around whether it's a drug choice or a treatment or not treat type decision?
Yeah, Omer, what do you think is the major limitation or obstacle?
Actually, the amount of data that we're going to get. Like now we have like sort of fixed protocols or the idea how we're going to treat a patient, but once we get so much data based on AI, so we will have to somehow deal with based patient and how much data we'll have to, especially if we're going to take it to the telemedicine, so we have alarms or alerts we'll have to deal with, and we are not there yet, and we're going to know what's going to do to the burden that we already have in our clinics. I think that's one of the big limitations.
Yeah, Vas, you're one of the pioneers in using machine learning, AI, segmentation tools, everything. What do you think are the hurdles?
Well, I think one area that we didn't really touch a lot upon is on validation. And I think a lot of AI tools are built, especially the research-based tools. Usually they're validated internally by the group developing the tools. And I do think that external third-party validation is going to be important, especially to be able to test in different environments. Daniela already pointed out that sometimes the tools can fail depending on the types of things that were included in the training set. But I think external validation is important. I think that's something that the regulators are starting to look at. And something to keep in mind moving forward into the future. Another big area, and I think Ursula really made a very important point, I think, which is about us as physicians taking control of this.
Exactly.
Because there are also, the flip side or the potential pitfalls of the era of personalized medicine is that if you have tools that can, for example, predict which treatment may do better or when a patient should intervene, you can imagine that parties outside of physicians, like payers and others, may want to take command of the situation and utilize those tools. And so it's going to be very important as us as physicians being involved in that dialogue to make sure that we don't lose control of our patient management.
Daniela?
I think along the same lines, and the panel highlighted that, but very bluntly, there are two main types of AI-based tools. They're the image segmentation tools, and there are the future prediction tools. And at the end of the day, what we're all discussing here, I think all challenges from the device development perspective, data, diversity, regulatory path, responsible use, it will be very different depending on what kind of tool we're discussing here. So the segmentation tools, they basically reproduce what an expert can do, but it's just faster, more reliable. But if we hypothetically had the time and the training to do, we could just sit down in front of the image and do the same. So it brings efficiency and reliability. Those are easier to be implemented and to be responsibly used. The future predictions will be the most impactful because they can do beyond what human eyes can do, human brains can process, but those are the challenging ones. Those that are the ones that need longitudinal data, those are the ones that the regulatory path is not clear, and those are the ones that for the end user will be harder to act on, because at the end of the day, we want those tools to empower the experts rather than removing them from the picture, and it's going to be challenging to act on those future predictions tools in a way that we keep control of the final decision.
Thank you. Ursula, I would like you to comment on that as well, and maybe incorporate into your answer also what do you think are the ways to really cause this collaboration between AI specialists and physicians, as you have done so well in your center and in your company?
I have no company, but if you have one for me, that would be nice. I'm just
You know
working
what
for
I
the
mean.
state. I'm just working for the state of Austria, but we did go ahead and we made a spin-off as we realized that the academic area has limits, and these limits are regulatory purposes.
That's what I meant.
Yes. And I think that in general, what we all discussed comes down to the point that AI is part or should contribute to precision medicine. And this is how we should handle AI. So start with precision. There are rules and regulation in computer science to provide reliability and plausibility. And we need experts to do this. Who am I? I'm a stupid clinician who halfway did medical school, but now I talk about AI. That's very prestigious, isn't it? But obviously, the giants on whose shoulders I'm standing are 22 computer scientists at my place, not my company,
Exactly.
but at
Teach
my
us how to do
university,
it.
and they know how to do it. They need instruction by us clinicians, but it's them who have to provide the tools that work and that we as clinicians can trust to a level that we can feel empowered by it. OCT did not kick out retina experts of business. The opposite is true. It made us very powerful, very much, well, underpaid or overpaid, and certainly overworked. So I'm not afraid that AI will delete us from the job plan. I think that AI is the natural next step, and we just have to do it the way it has to be done, because we have a lot of responsibility in healthcare, and healthcare means taking care of people, taking care of vision or blindness, and this is why we have to do it a professional way.
Thank you. So I would like to thank the panelists. I think you highlighted all the potential implications of AI in the management of our patients, in telemedicine, in personalized medicine, in clinical trials, but also the limitations and the things we still have to overcome, namely the collaboration with the AI specialists, liability, regulation, ethics, and so on. Definitely, we still have a lot to learn and a lot to work on using AI in the management of our patients. Thank you very much.